Gather round, children, and let old Pete tell you about the time he set sail with his old pal Eddie. Salty Eddie, people called him, on account of his being an old sailor, sure, but also because the salt never seemed to leave his body. His hair and his beard were a solid mass of the stuff. Horses would lick his face whenever he passed by, much to his consternation. But Eddie wasn't just salty on the outside, oh no, the man seemed to love nothing more than to eat a plate of bacon and wash it down with a bottle of soy sauce. His blood pressure was so high that the last time a doctor tried to stick him, the needle had been forcibly ejected and rammed 2 inches into the opposing wall. And this medical oddity was not helped in one way by the salt in his temper. He once got so angry at a cast iron skillet for cooking up his bacon all uneven that he'd attempted to eat the skillet instead. The tooth he'd chipped then got a half-hour dressing down for being a traitor and buried 20 feet deep in a hole of Eddie's own digging. On the upside, he'd once thrashed a bank robber so bad for holding up the line that the town of Shantytown hadn't seen a crime in the 6 years hence. What's that? Why is it called Shantytown? Why, because of the merry sea tunes everyone sings, of course. The local tourism board hates the name, and every year they try and get it changed. And every year the good folk of Shantytown sing merry sea tunes at them until they shut up. It's quite the tradition. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes, Eddie was on an inland errand of some kind and had stopped in the town of Krakensburg, which was most famous for the saltwater lake that had somehow been parted from the ocean in a time long past. And when it was, it had a single octopus in it. Now, there are 2 things you should know about octopuses. First, they can't die of old age. They usually die by the unrelenting arms of other octopuses in your brutal octopus clan wars, or they shrivel up when they breed. Second thing is that, uncontested and unbred, they grow to the size of whatever is holding them. Now, the people of Krakensburg didn't have a true kraken. Real krakens have 10 arms, and 4 of them are leaf-shaped, designed solely for slapping people who disrespect them. But they did have a 200-foot octopus, and they felt its size did merit an honorary title. Plus, Octopusburg is harder to pronounce. Now, the beast just so happened to surface when Eddie was in town, and it gave him the side eye. Eddie hated being given the side eye, even if the creature's shape meant that it really couldn't give him anything but. And that made Eddie spittin' mad. So he went back to Shantytown, took his ship apart, carried it a few planks at a time across 20 miles of burning desert, and had it halfway back together before he realized he wouldn't be able to sail and fight at the same time, no matter how mad he was. He didn't have many friends in the area owing to his disposition, but he knew I was always up to hunting and a dab hand with a harpoon besides. So he ties a message to the leg of a messenger coyote and sent him off for me. I arrived 2 days later with a limp, and the first question I asked him was why he couldn't have just called me on the dang telephone. He said he couldn't remember my number. I reminded him that it was 78. Frankly, his memory was as bad as his temper, but we weren't here to bicker with each other. We had a giant octopus to fight. He led me to his ship. Now, what in tarnation is that thing, I asked. That's your harpoon, he tells me. It's a sharpened tree trunk, says I. Nuh-uh, he says. It's still got the mark on it. Just fire it when I tell you, he says. And in an effort to keep his hands from harming his precious harpoon man, he had settled for ripping the shirt he'd been wearing to shreds, so I thought it best to shut my yap and got on the boat. It wasn't but an hour before the monster surfaced again, and once again gave Eddie the same side-eye by which he was originally so offended. So Eddie sets full sail and speeds towards it. Meanwhile, the tentacles are churning the water and the ship's getting tossed around like a mouse in a cat factory. Suddenly, the Kraken takes the intrusion personal and wraps a tentacle around Salty Eddie. Now, Eddie is mighty strong and mighty ambitious when he gets his blood up, and he rips those suckers off his body with an almighty series of pops. And for a short spell, things go quiet. Eddie looks down at his chest at the series of bruises the sucker had bestowed upon him. Nobody gets that privilege but Bonnie Claver, says he. Bonnie was a girl we'd gone to school with, and I'll tell you the rest of that story when you're older. Anyhow, I've never seen Eddie quite this calm, and let me tell you, it shook me to the bones of my soul. He tosses the appendage aside and climbs astride the harpoon. He tells me to fire, and I oblige him, partly because I promised, and partly because an angry Eddie over there is much preferable to an angry Eddie right here. Well, the harpoon, launched by an inadvisable amount of gunpowder and not properly weighted besides, hits the octopus sidelong with a sound I can't describe and wouldn't even if I could. Eddie crawls up on its head and starts punching and yelling. The creature retreated, or sank at the very least, with Eddie whooping on it all the way down. With the harpoon spent and figuring that Eddie wouldn't take kindly to me joyriding in his boat, I headed back to shore. Eddie and the Kraken washed up on the shore next day, both of them dead. And the coroner, checking over Eddie, said he'd suffered no deathly strike, nor had he bled out or been grabbed again. No, apparently the damn idiot fool in his 35 years of sailing had never taught himself how to swim. And he'd selfishly left me to deal with the town's tourism board, who were understandably steamed about having lost their mascot. But they eventually decided that having had a legendary sea battle was almost as good as having had a Kraken. They decided that from that time forward, the second Tuesday of every June would henceforth be known as Tentacle Tuesday in honor of the brawl. One of the tentacles was stuffed and hangs above the town hall. The rest of the Kraken was chopped up and made into jerky to be eaten on the special day, and as far as I know, they're still eating it once a year to this day. They were still annoyed at Salty Eddie at the time, so he was made into jerky too. Managed to slip a few strips into my pocket before I left though, so who's hungry and curious?